go smoothly. We're switching up the order of the presenters a little bit. My name is Freya Timpson. I'm a doctoral candidate here at UNC in the Communication Studies Department, and I am excited to introduce to you today our first presenter, whose name is Jessica Kerley from Syracuse University, and her presentation is titled Sexualization via the Equalizer for Men's and Women's Paralympic Coverage.
Hello, am I loud enough? Can everyone hear me? Okay, wonderful. Okay. The 2012 Olympics were incredibly important for the status of women and disabled individuals. It was the first time that a woman competed in every event, and the United States sent more women than men for the first time in history. It was also one of the first Olympics to allow a competitor who identified as disabled. Oscar Pistorius ran in both the Olympics and Paralympics in 2012. The Paralympics is the parallel competition for disabled athletes, and this 2012 Paralympics gained more media coverage than it ever had in its entire history. The Blade Runner, as Pistorius is often called, became famous for this feat of running in the Olympics, but he was also celebrated for other characteristics, such as his physical desirability and attractiveness. It is significant that this celebratory status for athletic success and attractiveness was granted to a male athlete. Male athletes continue to be celebrated in popular media, whereas when female athletes do gain media coverage, they are often sexualized or trivialized rather than celebrated for their athletic success. This paper seeks to analyze the current scholarship on sexual and disabled embodiment of athletes, as well as the popular media representation of two specific Paralympic athletes, Hope Llewellyn and Oscar Pistorius. I argue that the body of female disabled athletes are doubly marginalized, not only for the contingent nature of disability, but also for their femininity, and therefore they cannot be granted the equal recognition of male disabled athletes. The sexualization or asexualization of these bodies shows the societal preference for male athletes despite their abilities, as well as the inability to culturally equate disability with an attractive female form. The definition of disability is often contested. Tobin Sievers defines disability by both the medical and cultural models. He states, "The medical model defines disability as an individual defect lodged in a person, a defect that must be cured or eliminated if the person is to achieve full capacity as a human being." In contrast, disability studies uses a cultural model of disability to define this concept as, quote, "the product of social injustice, one that requires not the cure or elimination of the defective person, but significant changes in the social and built environment," end quote. I use the cultural model to frame my work, as I believe that what is considered disabled changes over time and location. Using literature by Michael Messner, Judith Lorber, and Judith Butler, I argue that female athletes are often marginalized as their bodies are socially seen as incapable to sporting success. This claim is furthered as athletes are marked by disability. Using Tobin Sievers, David Howe, Rosemary Garland Thompson, and Cynthia Barunas, among others, I observe the subordinate status attributed to disabled athletes and the doubly marginalized position placed upon female disabled athletes. Turning to popular media coverage, I juxtapose the media coverage given to Oscar Pistorius and Hope Llewellyn. Even before the current controversy surrounding Pistorius, he received more media coverage than any other Paralympic athlete in history. Although Hope Llewellyn has played in the last 5 Paralympic Games, in wheelchair tennis and currently as a seated volleyball player, she has received virtually no media coverage. In the paltry coverage that has been attributed to her, she is characterized as digressing from typical portrayals of female athletes as sexualized. In Mark Wood's article from the Palm Beach Post, she is first characterized by her atypical appearance. Quote, "Hope Llewellyn doesn't look like a tennis player, and not because she's sitting in a wheelchair," end quote. Woods then goes on to describe the attire and bodily piercings and tattoos adorned by Llewellyn. He observes that Llewellyn stands out because of her, quote, "baggy brown shorts, a metal bar through the right eyebrow, a tattoo on the left thigh, and black Converse All-Star shoes," end quote. Her appearance does not equate with typical domestic femininity, and this disruptor from the performance expected based on her assumed gender identity is significant enough to become a large portion of Wood's very short article. It is not only the fact that she is disabled, but her non-normative gender performance also eliminates her ability to pass as a culturally attractive female athlete. When Llewellyn's sexuality is referred to based on her appearance, she is still not sexualized in the ways typically seen by able-bodied female athletes. Schell and Rodriguez examined CBS coverage from the 1996 Paralympic Games, concentrating on a short segment dedicated to Llewellyn. They note that, quote, Llewellyn challenged popular media representations of female athletes, such as hair and dress. Her overtly gender-bending, androgynous physical appearance includes a mohawk haircut and multiple ear piercings, end quote. Yet, despite the attention she draws to her body, she is virtually never sexualized as an object. Llewellyn is often portrayed as a lucky participant, subsequently diminishing her athletic prowess and casting her as a more typically feminine role, despite her strategic gender-bending performance. This emphasis on generally considered feminine attributes, such as an acknowledgement of thanks and luck, is a dissociation from our typical understandings of athletic success. It's significant that each article highlights that an accident is what changed Llewellyn's body, claiming that at one time she was able-bodied. Focusing on her disability feminizes her as it causes disconnect between the assumption of athletically successful bodies and her own. Reports of her atypical body counter representations of female athletes as inherently sexual and possessing bodies which should be ogled. The super-ableism associated with sport, and therefore with sexualized sporting bodies, causes the disabled athlete to be seen with ambivalent sexual coverage, often resulting in assumptions of asexuality. Llewellyn challenges stereotypes of women as sexualized objects in sport, but does so at the cost of dismantling the connection between disabled bodies, sexuality, and athleticism. While it may seem as though an avoidance of sexualization should be celebrated, the fact that the media ignores Llewellyn as a sexual being may be seen as liberating, if only considering her gender, but problematic when considering that women with disabilities are often portrayed as asexual. The averted gaze of sport media serves to de-eroticize Llewellyn and align her identity as a sexual and social being. The fact that Llewellyn is disabled makes the camera's gaze de-eroticized, as disabled bodies are often not associated with sexual bodies. In the newspaper and magazine coverage afforded to Llewellyn, the typically sexualizing gaze continues to be missing. This lack of discussion about her sexuality, despite the attention she draws to her body, is a notable silence. This is an image of Llewellyn in her uniform in what the USA has been wearing when she was doing wheelchair tennis in 2008. This is how she would typically portray herself as she's accepting an award at her high school for being a famous alumni. Llewellyn's gender bending further dissociates her from sexualized, able-bodied female athletes. Amy Mullins, a double amputee who competed in the 1996 Paralympic Games, may be Llewellyn's antithesis. Mullins, who has modeled for Alexander McQueen and had some acting roles, is the epitome of the sexualized female athlete, despite her disability, a category that makes her an exception rather than the rule. Although Mullins has been extremely successful and has garnered a fair amount of media coverage, she never challenged the meaning of sport or made international headlines, therefore challenging the normative assumptions we attribute to disability. While this might be due to the temporality of her appearance and the lack of discussion about disability and athleticism in popular media at that time, it also might be because she's a woman. In contrast to Mullins and Llewellyn, Oscar Pistorius, the South African runner and double amputee, breaks the attribution of asexuality and trivialized athletic success given to disabled bodies. While Pistorius is known for being one of the first athletes to compete in both the Paralympics and Olympics, he is also known as being a sex symbol. Even before his Olympic fame, Michael Sokolov of the New York Times interviewed Pistorius and mentioned that he had a tattoo on his left shoulder and divulged the audience with multiple examples of his risk-taking behavior, associating it with aggressiveness. In this article, he also referred to Pistorius as being recently anointed one of the country's sexiest celebrities. Sokoloff discusses that at the time of the interview, Pistorius had recently ended a relationship with a longtime girlfriend, and another woman was currently visiting his home. His assumed heterosexuality continues to make headlines as the controversy with his murdered girlfriend continues to emphasize the fact that she was a supermodel. His heterosexual appeal in any of these cases is not heavily discussed in relation to his disability. The characterization of Pistorius as sexually desirable was also echoed in the end of the time after the Olympics, before the start of the Paralympics, in a London newspaper coverage which introduced Pistorius as a double amputee, an incredible athlete, and a bit of a hottie. This is a picture of Amy Mullins, so we can get the difference between how she is characterized as opposed to Llewellyn. This is a picture of Pistorius running in action. It's a very typical understanding of what he tends to be seen like in the media. And this is a picture of Pistorius modeling. It's from a website called Athlebrities, so it generally resonates athleticism and celebrities together. And you can see he's incredibly sexualized in this image, and although his disability is on display, it's also hidden. The celebration of a male disabled body in media marks a well-deserved achievement in popular media representations of disabled individuals. However, the association of disabled bodies with athletic success is an overwhelming association with the male body. Female disabled athletes, such as Hope Llewellyn, are not only marginalized in the amount of media coverage attributed to them, even in comparison with male disabled athletes, but the representation given to these athletes tends to trivialize and asexualize their experiences and identities. The framing of female disabled athletes in the media makes it impossible for a female disabled athlete to garner the amount of attention given to Pistorius. The bodies of female disabled athletes continue to be marked in ways which make it seem unfeasible for them to be praised as celebrities, both on and off the court. Even in the exceptional case when female disabled athletes continue to be sexualized, such as Amy Mullins, they are still not seen with the same athletic success that we attribute to men. Celebrity status, as seen as sexually attractive and athletically successful, remains a combination attributed overwhelmingly to men, regardless of their ability. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Jennifer Seifert from Ohio University, and Jennifer is going to be presenting, giving us a presentation entitled Slut Stories, Layered Narrative of SlutWalk Participants. Hopefully our computer will cooperate with us.
I'm going to test the limits of the technology here. We're going to do it. All right. So when we think of equality and images that we associate with that, there's some regular images that come to mind, people that we think about. Right? And these are kind of images that call to mind influential people in equality movements. Right? What do we do when the equality movement looks like this? Well, I am a slut. I'm also a sexual assault survivor. And I've participated in one SlutWalk thus far. And this project was really born out of having 1 foot in the academy and 1 foot in my experience. And so I entered this project wanting to do a layered narrative. So layered narrative, SlutWalk Participants is the title. So for a little history, if you're unfamiliar, SlutWalk was born out of a presentation that a police officer was giving at York University in 2011, and he was talking to a group of law students. And I have this quote up here. He said, "I'm told I'm not supposed to say this, but women should avoid dressing like sluts in order to not be victimized. That really bothered a lot of the audience members in his group. So in 2 short months, 2 months and a few days, they mobilized 4,000 people to have the very first slut walk. And imagine very much like a Take Back the Night kind of movement, but with different characteristics we'll talk about in a minute. But so in 2 short years, there's been slut walks in 13 different countries: New Zealand, South Africa, India, Israel, Nepal, the United States. I like to call it a viral social movement because this is a really fast viral spread. So I really approached this research really kind of informed mostly by my experience, but then looking at some of the literature with regard to social movements and how they were changing. Here's a quote from Sowers and Rengar about creating, this is third wave feminists, are creating movements that model leadership, use strategic humor, building feminist identity, sharing stories, and representing stereotype labels. So I didn't really have research questions proper, but I did really want to get a sense of why other people were participating in the movement, what their experience was like, if that mirrored mine at all, and just kind of give a voice to these individuals that were participating in this movement. So again, just like I said there, and really how these participants envision feminism, what does that mean? So when I pulled my data a couple weeks ago, I have done my analysis on 67 participants. Since then, that has over doubled, and I'll explain reasons why. But I had 64 women, 3 men. They range in age from 18 to 56 years old, mean age of 26. They were predominantly Caucasian. However, I just provided a space where, please identify your race or ethnicity, please list any that apply. So I really wanted people to just kind of self-identify with whatever they were comfortable. So I had Asians, Native Americans, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, Greek, Jewish, and then my favorite, I had 3 participants that identified as mutts. And I think that I'm going to borrow that from now on because I just like it. The conditions really were pretty broad. You had to be 18, you had to be an adult, and have participated in a slut walk previous to filling out the survey. And I had representatives from Chicago, Seattle, Portland, and London slut walks. So kind of a diverse spread. And I administered 4 open-ended questions via Qualtrics, which is an online survey software, just open-ended, very much just test, write as much as you want, as much as you're comfortable. And I contacted these organizations, different organizations to recruit via their Facebook. So I contacted different organizations and said, hey, can I post this message on your Facebook wall to get them to direct them to this link. So here are my 4 questions. Do you identify as a feminist? Why or why not? Please tell me the story of how you came to participate in Slut Walk. What message were you trying to convey through your participation? And how do or would you respond to someone who doesn't agree or understand with why you participate? So a lot of these questions were really informed by the comm focus of my study. I'm very interested in what people are trying to communicate through their participation. But also in this contestation of the movement, having a foot in my own experience in the movement and then also in the academy, there's a lot of very heated discussions about this movement and if it's basically serving its purpose, and we can talk about it afterwards if anyone's interested in discussing it, but regardless. So I found some specific themes thus far, many themes that are emerging from the questions themselves, but then also some overarching themes, and the ones that I have in bold here are the ones that I'm going to talk about today. The specific themes are some with regards to the feminism, also the controversy of the movement, and then some more general themes were the word slut and people's experience and how then that transcended across these different discussions. So the feminist label was kind of interesting because there was a lot of people that really pretty overtly identified with the feminist label. It's very much so, yes, I am, I believe in equality, these very interesting kind of, I don't want to say like rote responses, but just very much a lot of people identifying. But at the same time, there was kind of this reclamation and resistance to the label in a lot of ways. So here on the left, we have this participant basically, I think it's important for this definition to be reclaimed, as it's been distorted in popular media. And then you also have this idea of resistance, for which one gentleman quite simply asked, no, because I'm a man. And another said, I dislike the man-hating, not shaving, bitter women accusations of the word feminist, so I try to avoid it as much as possible around people I meet for the first time. That being said, I do consider myself a modern feminist and openly call myself one from time to time. So, very interesting kind of component of people consciously recognizing maybe the stigma in some ways that are tied to the word, and this is also supported in the literature quite a bit, that many people will identify with the social and economic political equality of women, but will not identify themselves as feminists. So again, more with the feminist label, this was a little more of like reappropriating kind of what it means, a little bit of resistance. So I do not identify as a feminist. I am a humanist because I believe in the equal rights for all. Or I identify as an activist. Or other ones down here at the bottom, regardless of gender, everyone deserves to be treated with respect and compassion. So kind of bucking this notion that it's specifically for women, or trying to broaden their activism or their concept of how they enact equality. With regard to the controversy, there were some interesting statements that people made, and one had a lot to do with these recurring themes. This particular participant's response really kind of exemplified a lot of the things that I was seeing. And I left the question very open for interpretation, so letting them define the controversy, basically explain to me like what you feel is controversial in this movement. So a lot of them really went for the education part, right? Like awareness, giving stats and things like that. But then there was other kind of rhetorical moves with regard to other people. It's not just about sluts. The only people here aren't, or I should rephrase, that there are people here that are dressed in pajamas, baggy jeans, a very common attire when at the Toledo walk that I went to was participants wearing jeans and t-shirts and signs that said this is what I was wearing when I was raped. So this idea of trying to really get at this, but again, very much like the LGBT movement, what you see in the media is very provocatively dressed, generally young women, and so there's a whole critique there. Anyway, so if you get down to the bottom of this one here, I thought this participants' information was interesting because they really framed it in the idea of the controversy was a conversation starter for them. So it was a good way to start this dialogue about why I participate and what it actually means and the premise behind even the word. So if you get a little further down, when people don't understand why I walk, it gives me a chance to talk about why I must. And here's some interesting dialogue with regard to the actual word slut. And so when you know the history, it becomes a little more apparent about why they chose this particular word. But there's also some rhetoric with regard to reclaiming the word. And again, that's a discussion we can have after the presentation. But one thing that I think really is interesting here is that many of the participants recognized that the word was controversial. They were like, yeah, I mean, I get the top people that kind of have a problem with the word. This individual said, they can't get past the negative connotation, and that's why the word needs reclaimed. So that's kind of an interesting framing. And then also the conscious raising components. While I dress modestly myself, it is not acceptable for society to bully someone or label them based on appearances. Extending that to where we connect their attire to their attack is outrageous, and SlutWalk sends that message too. It obviously took the word slut in the title of the march to get the public's attention. They sure didn't listen to our tears and our personal pain. Powerful message. So with regard to experience, and I'll let you read this one on your own, I won't elaborate on it too much, but in summary, this was a woman who framed her experience in terms of I'm sorry, I'm blocking your view. Being omitted from her congregation at church when she confided in her pastor that she had been the victim of sexual assault, and really framed in this idea that it was my fault. It was my fault for my own rape. In fact, they believe it was not a rape, but a choice, and that I called it rape so my boyfriend would not think I cheated on him. So more with regard to experience as a female and a sexual abuse survivor, my message is that it was not my fault. It took many years for me to realize that victim blaming needs to be stopped. That what happened to me was not my fault, and to challenge the premise that a sexual assault victim asked for it to show support to my sister who was raped. So there's very different levels of support. It's not always confined, at least in what these participants said, to their own experience, but many times there's this relational component, someone that they were enacting this movement for. These again reify what I had just spoken about before. So it happened to me, it's not my fault. I'm stronger than I think I am. I'm not the only person who has gone through this. And then we need to hold ourselves and each other responsible for this wrongly assigned burden of obligation and guilt. So as far as the status of this project, and something that I like to share, is I contacted a few of the SlutWalk organizations, like I said, and was contacted by Ta Granados from SlutWalk Seattle, and she said, hey, I'll go ahead and post this, but how do you think about going international with your survey? What do you think about that? And I said, I was like excited and terrified at the same time, and basically I have been working with her, and there's an international group of SlutWalk organizers. It's a closed Facebook group, so they do a lot of their organizing through Facebook, but she put me in contact and allowed me to post my message on the international page. So the reason there's that big disparity between the number of participants that I have now is that my survey just went international a couple weeks ago, or actually last week on Friday. So I'm here to kind of talk a little bit about the preliminary analysis of what I've gotten so far, but there's two things. I'm going to do another project with this, obviously would be very interested to see what other people have to say about basically what questions would you have for an international community of feminist organizers.
And our final presenter is Lora Smith from Wake Forest University, who is going to be giving us a presentation entitled The Importance of Community in the Carter Family Fold.
Do you know if the sound is working?
I don't know.
Do you know
If there's what?
if the sound is working?
Don't know yet.
So
We'll find out.
We'll find out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll have to hit escape.
On the keyboard?
Uh-huh. Just like a normal.
The screen's off, so I'm like, oh no. Technology's just not my friend today.
So do you have a
It's right there.
slides?
Yes,
Which
I
one?
do. This one, I believe.
This one.
I think, yes, that looks like it.
That's cool.
Should I try the music right now?
Sure, let's see. Yeah, let's see.
Okay. No worries. It's okay. Hey,
just bear with me for a second. I'm going to see if I can just pull up a snippet of the song that I wanted to play for you guys on my phone. So it might not be very loud, but you know this room has pretty good amplification. So we'll see what happens. Perfect. Okay, so sorry for the technological delay, but just to reintroduce myself, my name is Lora Smith, and I am a current graduate student at Wake Forest University. The title of my presentation is called The Importance of Community in the Carter Family Fold. So to start, I'm just going to ask a rhetorical question. What comes to mind when you hear the term Appalachia? I polled some of my friends, some of the people that I know, and these are some of the responses that I got. Mountains, moonshine, or moonshiners, poor, uneducated, and the most shocking is this one. Huh? Appalachia has a culture and isn't just a place? I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that one. I was appalled. I was thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Have you not seen TV? I mean, why would you think that it's just a place full of mountains and doesn't have people? That being said, this got my brain turning. And I was thinking, place, what does this mean? Can we talk about memory place? Can we talk about geographical location? Or how are we going to explore this? So back in my undergrad at Appalachian State University, maybe you can connect the dots why I had like in Appalachia. But I took this art class and I was introduced to this photographer, his images, and Shelby Lee Adams. And we explored the controversy because we were getting images like this. And you think, okay, they're black and white, they're really pretty visual images, but here's the kicker. This was 1988, 1989, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, people in Appalachia live like this? I mean, what does this mean for society? What does this mean for the local narrative, the national narrative? Why are we facilitating and promoting these negative stereotypes? More shockingly, I have a home funeral image. I mean, we can look at the images on these ladies' faces. We can see the dead body in the background. I mean, for like just personal connection, my father hails from eastern Kentucky, Appalachia. He said he hasn't seen a home funeral since he was 2 or 3 years old, and he's in his 50s. Not to age him, but he's not here, so it's all good. Lastly, I have this picture, which really just got me going when we explored the controversy. So Shelby Lee Adams paid for this hog to be slaughtered so he could take a picture of this historic ritual sacrifice, how they get food, because these people straight up said in their movie, the documentary, The True Meaning of Pictures, they cannot afford to buy a hog because the hog is a couple $1,000s. Shelby Lee Adams said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll pay for it. I just want to take the picture. So, we have this staged image, and he's arguing that he's trying to preserve society of Appalachia. But I disagree with him. I say what you're really doing is marginalizing these people, and you're further exploiting the community because you're trying to keep them in the old time. So I'm going to ask another question, quick raise of hands. How many of you have heard of the Carter family? Great, this is good. So I was an undergraduate, senior, thinking, okay, I have to write an honors thesis, what am I going to do? I wanted to do something with Appalachia, wanted to do something with music, wanted to explore the culture. Somebody introduced me to the Carter family and said, hey, have you ever heard of the Carter family fold? Has anyone heard of the Carter family fold? Perfect. So when I thought thought to myself, what is Appalachia? I think of nostalgia, memory, heritage. Most importantly, I think of music. Oh no.
You can probably just click no.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so anyways, think of music. And that's when I get to the Carter family. And it'll work, because I believe. Here's what I think of when I think of Appalachia.
Lord, I told thee, Undertaker, Undertaker, please drive slow. For this body you're holding, Lord.
Okay, so that's the Carter family song, Can the Circle Be Unbroken? They made a hymn called Will the Circle Be Unbroken, their own. So I go to explore this place because I'm interested in place, memory, place, geographical location. So I find myself submerged in Appalachia. This is an image of Scott County, Virginia. It's about 2.5 hours from Boone, 30 miles from Bristol, Tennessee. And I'm in coal country, because a lot of people think of coal mining, mountaintop removal, but I'm surrounded by these beautiful trees, this wisteria, these winding roads. And I am with two of my friends who we'll just call city slickers. They're getting car sick. Laura, we have no cell phone service. What are we gonna do? I'm like, come on guys, it's people, we're gonna be fine. So we pull up to this location and I have to parallel park my car, and I get out of my car and I feel the gravel underneath my feet. And I'm looking around, there's really nothing out there. There's some trees, there's a nice mountain range in the back, and I approach the fold. So I'm walking up to the parking area, which is right here. If you're handicapped, you can park right here. This is the main performance. They seat about 1,000 people, believe it or not. And this is I was coming here to see how memorials, because they pay homage to the original Carter family, and how they integrate the stereotypes of Appalachia into something that you can consider more mainstream. Well, I get there, and the parking attendant is like, well, hello, ladies. The first thing he says to me, where are y'all from? Ding, 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 here we go, here's my project, here's where we're gonna talk about place, and we're gonna explore this idea, and we're going to talk about the narratives of these individuals who come to the fold and come to this gathering place. Because I have an inkling that they're gonna be vastly different than the images that Shelby Lee Adams provides us with. So, here's just a quick, okay, so I had some questions for myself that were, how does the Carter family fold function as a site, I think that's really important to emphasize, of both memory and history? And how do the stereotypes of Appalachia affect this place? So concepts I'm considering, because they asked me, where are you all, or my friends and I, where are you all from? The insider-outsider concept. If I want to conduct ethnographic research, and I want to do interviews, and I want to do participant observation, I'm an outsider. I don't have a Southern accent. How am I going to be let into their culture? What kind of obstacles am I going to face? Then I was considering memory and history. How am I going to talk about the importance of these personal narratives and give these people the voice without putting my own judgments and my own biases in the interpretation of how this place functions rhetorically. This is inside, oh man. This is another image of the fold, but I like to emphasize the importance of the sign where it says old time music. So in contrast, where Shelby Lee Adams is trying to highlight the culture, the old-time culture of Appalachia, I feel that he is exploiting and marginalizing the group further, where the Carter family fold is celebrating old-time culture. They're not trying to be something they are not, but they're celebrating the past, and they're paying attention to the history, and nostalgia and narrative and oral history of what they have been taught when they were young kids, and how are they going to bring it to people in the future. As you can see, that Carter Family Fold, there is primarily older demographic, which is very interesting because these people, I was really worried about the insider-outsider, but these people want to talk to you, and they want to get to know you, and they want to learn about your culture, but they want you to learn about theirs. So if you don't know how to flat foot dance, someone's going to grab you and say, hey, come flat foot dance. I'll go really slow for you. I'll show you what we're going to do. And I think that's just great. I had never done flat foot dancing or square dancing, and 2 weeks ago I got to do that, and I thought that was pretty awesome. So often this, well, I refer to this place as a pilgrimage destination. You'll see why in a second. But the main so what of my project is that I argue that the Carter Family Fold is an authentic reflection of an endangered culture with the emphasis on oral history, performance, and narrative. These people only have bands that are old times, so there's no electronics. They either do cover songs or they sing their own, and the people that gather here regularly are celebrating the nostalgia, and they feel like they've stepped back in time, but they acknowledge that they have other lives that you don't see, like that are highlighted in the Appalachian Legacy books from Shelby Lee Adams. The road that they placed this Carter Family Fold is now on the Crooked Road, which they want to get tourists. So they want other people that aren't from the Appalachian region to go to the Carter Family Fold and engage in the discussions with them and celebrate what it means to be a part of Appalachia on both the local and the national level. So as you can see, the road is pretty windy, but it's beautiful, and I feel that this is part of the experience. So we are all shown images of Appalachia with them, having arguments about like battling coal country and mountaintop removal and not environmentally friendly, but this is kind of an enclave, I suppose, where they are focused more on the positive of Appalachia and what it means to both the local and the national narration, and they are, slightly offended by what they may or may not see being portrayed by them. So this is where I want to expand my project, and I'm going to actually do this as my master's thesis, where I'm going to incorporate more of this concept called the ethos of rhetoric, which refers to the way discourse is used to transform space and time into dwelling places. And dwelling places are where people can deliberate and know together some matter of interest. And that's what I think is very important, because dwelling places define people's ethics and moral characteristics. And that is what I want to highlight, is I want to highlight the personal narration and how does this place function as a place in a space, as a memory place, incorporating all of these various aspects while counteracting the stereotypes that are thrown at them on the daily. So you can see that there's an emphasis on heritage. This is a grainy cell phone picture where they have the old-time band and they have the flat-foot dancers, and much to my surprise, there are about 300 or so people attending this night when I went about a year ago. So this picture was taken, and this is the original country store of A.P. Carter, one of the original member of the Carter family, and that's there on the site, as well as the cabin. And so they're trying to represent Appalachia in a positive way and show more of an authentic representation of Appalachia, not something like this, going back to Shelby Lee Adams, where he's finding people in the hollers and he's placing things there to make a pretty picture, to get the shock value and the awe value, and to perpetuate the stereotypes and further marginalize the community. So as you can see, he's setting up this image, and then voila, it looks like this. And you can see that the people are, dirty and sad and he's not wearing a shirt, and you can see that they don't have much. I mean, you can just make up all kinds of narration about this, but what he's not showing is that this is an inauthentic representation of the community as a whole, and that's the conclusion of my project.
Thanks, Laura. All right, well, everybody has a really interesting objective study, and I'm sure that you all have questions to ask these presenters about their research and things that they are telling us about today. So I'm going to open it up to questions if anyone would like to ask one.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to Laura, if you haven't read the work by John McKay, he's on Let Us All Now, Greatest Famous Man, I'm sure you have. I think you're really onto something, and I've never heard about photographers staging things in that way, and I think it's awesome, and I think that the way you talk about, you could put it this way, how equality has a dwelling place, you know? I think that's really cool, but I've been on panels with Matthew Ingraham, and he's doing research on representations of Appalachia. And so, when I think of Appalachia, I think of textile stripes. That's my first thought. But
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, also in a similar vein, Carol Blair has done tons of work. I don't know if you've read her piece about the Plains Indian Museum,
Oh, yeah.
but she specifically talks about pilgrimage. And I think the idea of place and space is really interesting. Something I would encourage you to do, having lived in Appalachia for some time now, is to expand that view of Appalachia, right? In Ohio, Appalachia means something very different than it does in Kentucky, than Virginia, and in West Virginia. And there's been lots of initiatives throughout the state of Ohio in particular to create Appalachia, or Appalachians as a class, to have increased enrollments in college, right? It was something we tried at Ohio University for a while, but there was contestation over what counted. And so there was some people that said it was 3 generations of living in Appalachia, and there was other kind of contested definitions. And so I think in that idea of pilgrimage is also contestation internally over who gets to call themselves Appalachian.
To kind of add to that, I found it really interesting. I love your enthusiasm about this. It made me kind of think about if you are doing a combination between rhetoric and ethnography as well, maybe looking into, I'm not sure how creative you want to get, but Sarah Pink from England, she does sensory ethnography. So you actually collect ethnographic data through music, through sight, sound, feel, touch, and they're really fascinating multimedia projects that kind of come out of sensory ethnography. So I think that there's a potential kind of playground that that's fascinating. I would also suggest Taylor and the ethics of authenticity, especially claims of authenticity, like asking kind of ethical questions about that. And then just posing a question. It's interesting the way you framed one as inauthentic and one as authentic, which also makes me question, are they both myths? Like, are these both myths that we project to kind of counteract and balance each other as one being negative and one being positive? So I think that would be a really, once again, kind of interesting playground intellectually to kind of engage in. You know, is this all of them? And is there anything wrong with that, especially when it comes to public memory and historical remembrance?
Okay, great. So I am studying visual rhetoric right now, and I think that the understanding of visual rhetoric almost always equates this sort of realism with photography, right? Whereas